Presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. You haven't checked them out yet? We'd love to see you over there. And you can get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points that you can use as currency, as real money on the site simply by using our link. And use the code AWESOMO when you sign up. We'll drop the link into the chat on YouTube and you can sign up. Look, no 150 entry max, none of that. 10 entry max. Lower management fees on all of the contests. Some of them, like the $3 one they run, $500 to first place almost every day. We've seen a zero management fee on that. So a lot of benefits to playing on Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, especially in the event that you aren't using Cruncher, you're not throwing in 150 lineups, you like hand building lineups, and you like taking the time that goes into that and enjoy that process. Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports is 100% the site for you. And when you deposit, get up to $30 in money to play on the site. Call them Yahoo Sports Rewards points, but it's money. So hit that link. We'll drop it in there, and we'll get you going. Use the code AWESOMO. All right, Adam, 5 games today, coming off a 7-game early slate. So the pitching on this slate doesn't really offer all that much. There are some big names, but as far as it breaks down, as far as roster construction goes, would you say one of the weaker pitching slates when matchup is involved with matchup concerned?
Yeah, it's just a weird slate because you obviously only have 5 games, but the talented pitchers on the slate all have, at least to some degree, pretty difficult matchups. And with it being a 5-game slate, they're going to be popular. So it's just a weird slate in that I'm probably going to look to just be contrarian, weight contrarian lineups even a little bit more than I normally do, just because my confidence level in even my best projected pitchers is lower than normal.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. But we're here to break them down anyway. Good pitching, bad pitching, doesn't matter. We're talking about it. We'll kick it off with Toronto and the New York Yankees. J.A. Happ, Edwin Jackson. I mean, this guy's been a train wreck. And obviously Coors Field was, nothing's ever a lock in baseball, but I think you'd agree if there was ever a spot where, if someone gave you $10,000 and said you got to bet it all on one spot, you have to. If you win, you keep it. If not, whatever. Would it not have been on the Rockies going over against Edwin Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those spots where it was so obvious that it felt like it wasn't going to work out. And then
right.
I think they scored 10 runs in the first 3 innings.
Yeah, they did. He allowed 10 runs in 2 1/3 innings. Yeah. It wasn't pretty. He had negative 15 fantasy points. That's amazing. But on the other hand, J.A. Happ, his season hasn't exactly been sterling either. His last 2 starts have been a lot more encouraging. But he's allowed a lot of home runs this year, Adam. And I say we just break that down and jump into it right now. You're talking about a guy that's allowed 15 long balls in 12 starts. He's cut it down a bit over his last 2. But J.A. Happ, the long ball has plagued him this season, and we've seen it cut his outings short, and we've seen it, limit his strikeout totals because he isn't going as deep into games. But maybe he's figured something out.
Yeah, I mean, the strikeout percentage this year is down to 21.1% from 26.3% last year, still giving up home runs. And the reason it really concerns me is that strikeout percentage stabilizes quickly, faster than most other stats. But also, with the exception of the last year or year and a half, Happ was never a high strikeout pitcher. So right. It's kind of like he's just gone back to what he was for most of his career. And he's facing a Toronto team that isn't the best. Their active roster since 2017 has the 10th highest strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching. They have a 94 WRC plus. So it's not the worst matchup, but you do still have power in this lineup, especially a really underpriced Vlad Guerrero and Randall Grichuk. So those are guys that I would rather prioritize than Happ. I wrote him up because I think that he stands out as, the best mid-range play. There's not that many of them on the slate, obviously, but even in my initial crunch on DraftKings, where with it being a 2-pitcher site, that's where you'd be most interested. I didn't really get to much because pitching is all kind of so bad that I just ended up either paying up and then paying down. I didn't really go to the mid-range.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of what it feels like here. It really does. And again, it's not even that Happ's been that bad, but it does feel rather difficult to get to him. So let's just talk about this game then as a whole. We'll get to hitting. Is there anything that stands out to you? I mean, obviously Edwin Jackson being on the mound means that we're going to probably have a long discussion here.
Yeah, I like bats in this game a lot. I mean, from the Yankee side, it's obviously because they're facing a not very good pitcher in Jackson. He's been bad this year, but even if you go back to last year to get a bigger sample size, against righties, a 356 expected WOBA, 225 expected ISO since last season, hasn't struck out more than 18% of hitters, on either side of the plate. No Gleyber Torres in this lineup, takes one power bat out, but you still have Hicks, Voit, Sanchez, a very, very cheap Kendrys Morales, who I think is probably a staple in cash games and someone that is fine in tournaments too. But if you skip over him in your stacks, it probably automatically makes you contrarian since he's hitting fifth and really, really cheap.
And to be fair, he does suck at this stage of his career. Totally agree with you, but it's not like a fade of Kendrys Morales can't work.
Right. It's not like they priced, Gary Sanchez at 3,300 and you're saying, oh, well, if I just don't play Gary Sanchez, I'll be different.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, he can single 3 times, be a good cash play, and not affect you whatsoever in tournaments. So I mean, they still have power in this lineup even without Torres, and Jackson's just been really, really bad. So obviously, like the Yankees, and then on the other side, Vlad Guerrero and Randall Grichuk in particular stand out. Teoscar Hernandez as well, back with this team, and if nothing else, he has power, and he's really, really cheap. So those three, kind of the same three that came through last night, give you upside. Justin Smoke has less power from the right side than the left side of the plate. Gurriel is fine, but the guys that I'd be prioritizing from Toronto, whether it's mini stacks or one-offs, are Guerrero, Grichuk, and Hernandez.
Okay. And I guess we can move on. Anything else on this one? I do want to make sure we cover every game in depth since there only are 5 of them. But I think you pretty much touched on everything here. Anything else?
No. I mean, Hap is – if you get the Hap, I wouldn't rework your lineups or anything, but – I don't think that he's a great play either.
Okay. Yeah. And by the way, implied run totals for this game, 5.9 for the Yankees. That's the second highest on the slate. And on the opposite side for Toronto, it is 4.2, third lowest of the 10 teams going here. As far as the Indians and Minnesota Twins go, the Indians have a pretty, underwhelming 4.4 total, but it is against the good pitcher in Berrios. Not the highest strikeout pitcher, but a decent enough pitcher. And then against Trevor Bauer, the Twins are at 4.2. So I have a feeling we'll do a lot of pitching discussion here. Even if you're not huge on these guys, they are two of the more talented pitchers on this slate.
Yeah, in my initial crunch, which was DraftKings, I'm just using my baseline projections before the show, I got to a lot of Bauer as my highest owned pitcher just because of the price point. It's not a spot, like I said at the beginning, that I have a ton of confidence in him not getting blown up. Twins are really good. They don't strike out. They have power. Bauer struggled with his command this year. You have over 10% of the batted balls against him have been barreled this year, which obviously isn't good when you're talking about a team with the highest ISO in baseball against right-handed pitching. So it's a really scary spot, but you do at least know that Bauer is going to throw a lot of pitches, and he has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 27%. So there is at least some upside there. It's just that with it being a 5-game slate and knowing that he's going to get a lot of ownership, it makes me interested in the Twins bats just for leverage reasons.
Okay. Anyone specific or just pretty much a leverage stack here?
Yeah, I mean, leverage stack is good, but also, Rosario, Kepler, Polanco, they're kind of expensive, but they do have power, and Bauer is getting hit pretty hard this season.
Do you have any interest in Berrios?
Not a ton, at least on DraftKings. On other sites, if he's cheaper than Bauer, I could see getting there. But on DraftKings, so on FanDuel, he's $1,100 cheaper than Bauer. On Yahoo, he is $2 more expensive than Bauer. So on Yahoo and DraftKings, it's tough for me to get there just because I don't think that he's a matchup. I don't think it's a great spot for him either. He's facing a bunch of lefties, not the best strikeout matchup, and he's not the highest strikeout pitcher, and he's more expensive than Bauer, who's in a tough matchup but has better strikeout stuff, and when he's able to locate, is a better pitcher. So it's site dependent for me.
Okay, fair enough. You move quick through these. Texas and Baltimore against David Hess. The Rangers have the highest implied total on the slate. No surprise whatsoever. 6.4 at Globe Life Park. 83-degree temperatures in Arlington. I mean, everything's favoring hitting here. It's also, it is a team, sans Joey Gallo, but you got Santana back, Mazzara, no Chu in the lineup. There's Drupal Cabrera, Odor, Guzman. There are a lot of lefties here, but all in all, Hess is just not a very good pitcher. And I think the biggest thing here, once again, Adam, is the amount of home runs allowed this season. 19 home runs allowed in 11 starts. I mean, you're looking at almost 2 home runs per start for this guy. He's got this. You want to hear something remarkable? David Hess has allowed 3 home runs or more in 5 starts already. That's crazy high.
That's incredible. And yeah, I mean, so obviously Texas is a good stack. They have like 6.5 implied run total. I don't think that's, surprising to anyone, but I was getting on DraftKings where he's 4,200, a pretty decent amount of David Hess in my initial crunches just because of the price tag. He's cheap enough where he can give up a few home runs, and as long as they're solo shots, it doesn't really matter. And if you look at the rest of the lineup, it allows you to get, like a Patrick Corbin or a Trevor Bauer, along with the Yankees and Mike Trout and, whoever else you want. And I just don't think the opportunity cost at pitcher is that high today. So I expect that he probably won't be that highly owned just because Texas is clearly in a great spot and Hess isn't good. But there's not any pitchers on the slate that I feel great about. So I'm okay just taking like a minimum priced one.
It's funny because we nailed John Means as a punt yesterday. And Joe Musgrove had like his best game of the season.
He was also on the
Who?
Musgrove.
Oh, I know, but I'm saying we had mentioned that we liked Means over Musgrove.
Yeah.
I mean, look, they both had solid games. I think Musgrove got the win, though, so.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is it's not impossible for teams or for pitchers to have good performances in bad spots. But I do think it's also worth pointing out that the reason I liked Means wasn't just because he has a good changeup, but also because he's a lefty. And this Rangers team is a lot worse against lefties, Adam.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the difference for me is I also think Means is a not good, but like a mediocre pitcher.
Well, he's significantly better than Hess, put it that way.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't think Means belongs at AA. I think Hess belongs at AA.
Right.
So this is like purely a price play where if he happens to somehow pitch well, you're also knocking out a lot of people that have Rangers bats. If you're going on 5-game slates, I normally don't take hitters against my pitchers because there's enough different ways to go. But he's cheap enough and the Rangers have enough power that I don't even mind just isolating some of those bats against him because it's really, really unlikely that Hess actually gives you a good start. I think it's more likely that he gives up a couple home runs and gives you a good enough start to be worth the price.
Right. And obviously you're still very much interested in Ranger bats.
Yeah, of course. It's a great spot. I mean, Hess is terrible, gives up a ton of power to both sides of the plate, doesn't strike out guys. The Orioles bullpen is terrible behind them. It's just an obviously good spot for Texas.
Who are your favorite hitters here?
Cabrera, kind of the bottom of the Texas order, actually, when you look at price tag.
I thought the exact same thing. I like Santana, though.
Yeah, I like Santana's fine. The Shields is fine leading off. I mean, he's really cheap. But the way that I expect ownership to be distributed, just because of how it's always distributed, is that you'll get a lot of people on Santana and the Shields. You'll get people on Odor just because of the position and on Cabrera. But like if you mini stack and include like Guzman and Kiner Falefa at the bottom, you're going to get a lower owned version of Texas that really isn't much worse than the top part.
Right. Yeah, I agree. What are your thoughts on the opposite side of this one? Ariel Jurado going for the Rangers. Implied total for Baltimore is coming in at 4.7 here. They're obviously big dogs on the road, but they've shown some ability to hit. They've been much better against lefties, though, and Jurado actually hasn't been that bad. He's gotten a pretty reasonable amount of ground balls as well, which I found pretty interesting. Is it still up? Let's see. Ground ball rate, 52% against lefties, 54 against righties. It should serve him better than most at Coors Field, at least. Or sorry, Globe Life.
Yeah, and he's actually struck out 23% of righties this year so far too, which is surprising. I think that he's okay. Like if you can't stomach going to David Hess, which I don't blame you, I think Jurado is still cheap enough where you can get most of the bats that you want if you go to him as an SP2. He doesn't have a ton of strikeout upside, but he has more than Hess. He's got a more favorable matchup than Hess does. It's just that he's also on DraftKings $2,400 more expensive. On Yahoo, where there's a $4 price difference, I'd rather get to Jurado than Hess.
Okay. Yeah, I think I would too. Do you have any interest in Baltimore hitters?
Chris Davis and Keon Broxton are both $7 on Yahoo. they stand out just because. So is Rio Ruiz actually. They stand out because they have power, and Jurado doesn't strike out a lot of lefties. Broxton obviously is a righty, but Ruiz and Davis are lefties. So I think that they're kind of appealing. Chance Sisco also probably will be in the lineup because Pedro Severino left last night's game after getting hit in the face by a foul ball. So Sisco had been hitting a bit better at AAA this year than in the past, and it's not like it's a bad matchup for him. So I think that the bottom of both of these teams is actually pretty appealing.
Okay. Anything else on this one? It is, one of the highest projected scoring games on the night.
So I guess just to clarify, like I like the bottom of the order, but it's not to say that I don't like, the tops with Mancini and Mazzara and, Nunez, depending on which team you're talking about. They're obviously good too. It's just that I think you will probably get lower percentages of the bottom of the order stack compared to the top.
Okay. Makes sense. Well, we got 2 games to go. There is not a ton on this slate. That's the thing. I mean, there are a lot of obvious spots, and you know what? At the end of this, once we get through all of it, give our stacks, we'll talk about maybe some contrarian ways to get some leverage on a short slate like this, especially since we'll have a little bit of time available to us. And of course, Live Before Lock is going to take you up till 7:07 with all of their information as well. So you want to stick around on the Awesemo_com YouTube channel. Oakland and LA, Tyler Skaggs, Mike Fiers. Skaggs is striking out more than a batter per inning this season. His numbers aren't bad. He's really never been bad. Like Skaggs isn't a bad pitcher. He's maybe a little bit above average. He's got a swinging strike rate below 10% thus far, though. Doesn't get a ton of ground balls at all. He just, he's getting 23% strikeouts against lefties, 24% against righties. He's slightly above average in that category.
Yeah, and it's a pretty tough matchup here against an Oakland team that has a ton of righties that are good. I think Skaggs is a perfectly fine play just because of this slate. It's not like the matchup's really worse for him than it is for Bauer or Corbin. Like Corbin's is a bit better, but he's also more expensive. So getting the Skaggs I think is pretty reasonable. I'm getting more of him than like J.A. Happ in my crunch, but it's still not a really appealing spot. There's not a ton of strikeouts in Oakland's lineup, and they do have a lot of power. You also have a lot of underpriced guys on Oakland, which I think is important, not when you talk about Skaggs, directly, but when you talk about your roster construction and where you want to get to, the fact that you can get so much power in a better hitter's park than they're used to at cheap price tags makes it so that there's an opportunity cost in going to Skaggs over Oakland. So I mean I like Skaggs as much as I like anyone I guess on the slate, but it's not like it's a great spot.
Yeah, and the totals in this one, the Angels are at 5-1 against Fiers, Oakland at 4-6 against Skaggs, and we've talked about this a lot on the Deeper Dive. Angel Stadium, it's not Coors, it's not Globe Life, it's not CBP, it's not Great American, but it's also not Oracle or O.co or T-Mobile, right? Like we've seen a lot more home runs over the last 1+ seasons.
Yeah, and so that's why I think it's important, or that's why I mentioned with Oakland, like they have power, but they're also getting out of O.co, and you're getting rid of that spacious foul territory. You're getting a park that plays up home runs more than their home park, and they're still really cheap. It's not a good matchup for them, but you look at price tags where you have a $3,500 Piscotty on DraftKings, $3,900 Davis. There's nobody in this lineup over 4K except for Matt Chapman at 4,200.
It's crazy.
So it's just a lot of power in a pretty good park for hitters against a good but not lights out pitcher in Skaggs.
It is strange though on DraftKings how cheap these Oakland bats have been, and normally I'd be like, oh, it makes sense, they haven't been great, but you have a lot of teams and players that have not hit well, that are priced way higher on a nightly basis, almost regardless of matchup.
Yeah, and it's not just DraftKings either. I mean, Chapman's the most expensive player on FanDuel at $3,700 on the A's. On Yahoo, nobody's $20. Chapman's $19.
Right.
Nobody else is above. Laureano is $16. I don't know how that worked, but Laureano is $16. No one else is above $15. Basically, the entire team's $15. And then like Pinder's $10 and Semion's $12. It's just a spot with a lot of upside. I would caution, I guess, like Pinder, I think is a good play if he's hitting second. He's cheap. He has second base eligibility on DraftKings. He's an outfielder on Yahoo. He does have pinch hit risk once Skaggs comes out of the game, but he's cheap enough, and assuming he's batting second, should probably still get like 3 or 4 at bats.
All right. What are your thoughts here on the Angels against Fires? He's been a roller coaster ride this season, but that's just something we've seen from him quite often. But he's also somebody that will give up some power, which is important. Well over a home run per 9 this season. If you're talking about Mike Fiers' splits against lefties, he's at 1.42 home runs per 9, 1.89 to righties, 17% strikeouts to righties, only 15.8% to lefties. So, I mean, one thing we know about Fiers is you're usually going to put the ball in play against him.
Yeah, and so he's been worse against right-handed power, which obviously makes Mike Trout stand out. Not that it really matters who he's facing, but it's clearly a good spot for Trout. I think it's a sneaky good spot for Albert Pujols because at this point in his career, Pujols obviously isn't the hitter that he used to be, but he also struggles with high-velocity fastballs, and Fiers doesn't have that, but he still throws a lot of fastballs, which Pujols can hit. So you're just getting, slow fastballs for Pujols. And looking at my initial crunch with my baseline projections, I didn't get a lot of Pujols, which just tells me that he won't be that popular most likely because I was purely using projections and nothing else. So I think that he's a spot where you might be able to get a little bit lower ownership than you would on Trout or Ohtani as part of like a mini stack. And obviously I still like Ohtani, who's still really cheap, never had anything wrong with him, and is making that pretty clear now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you here. The discount on Ohtani had been pretty spectacular, and he's still below 4K on DraftKings. You and I had been just keep playing him. You just keep playing him until he's at a price point that begins to reflect his talent. And even so, you can keep playing him. But he's 15 on Yahoo. He's 39 on DraftKings. I mean, this is a very good hitter. 35 on FanDuel too, Adam. Like, he's cheap, a little bit more on one site than the other, but he's in play everywhere.
Yeah, like I know you and I have talked about it before, but obviously we have the time. He didn't have. It's not like he had 250 at bats and was just hitting for no power this year. People just were really quick to jump on like, oh, he lost his power because of his injury or whatever.
Right, ridiculous.
Right, like it was just a really small sample size, and now he's getting back to where you expect him to be. There was no reason, if you looked at his batting ball profile, to think that there was anything wrong with him. And now he's just doing what we expected him to do. So there's no reason to jump off at this point.
Yep. I'm with you. All right. I guess that's it for this game, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Let's tackle the last one here. We'll give our stacks talk a little strategy before we head out. Padres, Nationals. These are the two lowest totals on the slate. 3.7 for the Nationals against Lucchese, and 3.9 for the Padres against Patrick Corbin. Padres actually slight favorites here, Adam, with Lucchese on the bump at home. What do you make of this pitching matchup? 2 sub-4 totals, but I don't think, and I'll let you expand on it, but I don't think this Padres team, I mean, I know they're not the same Padres team from the past, but more than anything, while you are going to get some strikeouts, like even against lefties, I think they're better against lefties than their active roster numbers would suggest right now, just at least from a power perspective. But WOBA WRC plus, they have not been very good. They do have a 203 ISO and a 26.6% K rate. So obviously there is a lot of upside for Patrick Corbin here today.
Yeah, but there's a couple things that stand out, and I think Corbin is one of the best pitching plays on the slate. Obviously, there's not that many to choose from. The Padres aren't as scary an offense as Minnesota, and he's got almost the same strikeout percentage as Trevor Bauer this year. But the things that kind of stand out as concerning, for one, his strikeout percentage this year is lower than last season, which I think a lot of people expected. but I don't see any signs of it really improving. I think it's kind of that's what we're going to get from Corbin unless something changes, is, right around the 27% strikeout percentage. He's basically league average in called strike plus swinging strike. He's around league average in 2-strike percentage. There's nothing that stands out as, he's going to turn a corner sometime soon. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But also the Padres active roster since the start of 2017, they have a 21.3% strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching, 94 WRC plus, 184 ISO. So the WRC plus isn't good, but the strikeout percentage is below average, and the ISO is above average. So it's not the easiest spot for him. You look at the lineup, and Machado is not an easy strikeout. Renfroe barely strikes out against lefties. Kinsler is not an easy strikeout. So it's not the greatest spot. But then also this year, if you look at Corbin, he's only struck out 23.7% of righties compared to 36.8% of lefties. So his strikeout numbers are kind of skewed by how dominant he's been against lefties. He's also allowed a 198 expected ISO to righties. He's giving up a pretty healthy amount of barrel contact as well. So again, I think Corbin's a good play. It's just that everyone knows he's a good play, and you can get, Franmil Reyes or Manny Machado or Hunter Renfroe as really, really powerful leverage plays against him.
For sure. Yeah, it makes sense. I don't have any disagreement with that at all. I do think he is one of your highest upside options that you have today, and I don't think that's much of a dispute, but there's also a lot of power in these bats for San Diego. And I think that's one of the biggest things here. The Padres make for a very hit or miss type matchup if you're stacking them or playing a pitcher against them, right? Because if you look at their ISO this year, they are very solid against lefties. Let's see. I'm pretty sure it ranks top 10. It is 203. So yeah, right around 10th. But their ISO or their WRC plus of 89 is way down. It's bottom like 7, and their 303 WOBA's equally underwhelming. So they're a team that could just go out there and swing and miss, give you 10 strikeouts, or they could put 3 or 4 home runs into the seeds.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think that, I know I'll have a pretty good amount of Corbin. It's just that I also want to make sure I'm getting in some Padres bats because of how much power they have. And you have to keep in mind from an upside standpoint too, that if they are able to get the Corbin early, the Nats bullpen is bad. And, so that's something, no matter who they bring in, it's guys that have really struggled. So you do get some added upside there later in the game.
All right. Thoughts on Lucchese?
Another just brutal matchup for a good pitcher. One thing that is scary about Lucchese is that he normally doesn't have that long of a leash. Like normally you're going to see him pulled around 90 pitches instead of say 105. The Nats have their active roster against lefties has a 21.5% strikeout percentage since 2017. So basically the same as the Padres, except they also have a 109 WRC plus. So they've been more productive. You have, Anthony Rendon, who's a really, really good hitter. Kendrick is fine. He's tough to strike out. Dozier, if he's in the lineup, and Robles are both righties that have some power. It's not the easiest spot for Lucchese, but you are at least getting a discount off of Corbin. So if you're going to get lower ownership on Lucchese, I think it's an okay spot to go to, but it's still just not an appealing matchup whatsoever.
It's really not. I think there was this idea earlier in the year that the Nationals were so bad against lefties and righties, and that was true. But that was when they didn't have Trey Turner. Juan Soto was on the DL. Anthony Rendon was on the DL. Matt Adams, I'm talking in general, was on the DL. Dude, they were down literally half of their starting lineup.
Yeah, there was a time when we were streaming pitchers against the Nats, but
right.
It was when all of these guys were injured.
Right, and now you look at this active roster, it's 18th in strikeout rate against lefties, and here's the thing, they're only gonna get better. They have a 130 WRC plus against lefties this season. You know where that ranks? First.
Right.
Not more than a month ago, they were bottom 5, Adam. So it just shows you how much can change over the course of a month, especially when you're relying on a sample like that at the beginning of the season.
Yep. And yeah, and I think Lucchese is good. It's just that I think if you played this matchup out a bunch of times, what happens a large percentage of the time is that you get, 6 innings and a handful of strikeouts from Lucchese, where he doesn't get blown up. He's not someone you need in your lineup either. But that's how I feel about most pitching on this slate.
For sure. Who do you think will be behind the mound for the Padres today? Hedges?
I'm guessing Hedges.
Yeah, because last time I looked, Hedges has been at the top of the league in run pitch framing. Leads all catchers in pitch framing this year. Adam leads catchers. All catchers in called strikes above average. You can find these on Baseball Prospectus. Some really, really good marks on this guy. And when you're looking at swipe rate above average, how does he do at holding runners? He has been really good. Let's see. How about this, dude? Only Real Muto and Severino have been better than him this year in that department.
Wow.
So I only point that out because if he was bad and you're going up against the Trey Turners and speed, it's even worse. But I didn't know Hedges had been that good behind the plate.
Yeah, really good pitch framer.
What's that?
I said, yeah, he's a really good pitch framer.
Yeah, I didn't know he was that good. What are your thoughts on hitters here? We'll get a little bit in depth and then we'll close it out.
So, yeah, I mean, I kind of already mentioned the Padres that I like getting to them either as a full stack, looking to take advantage of the terrible pitchers behind Corbin, or as one-offs, just looking to leverage against him with specifically Reyes, Machado, and Renfroe. Machado, I think, is a cash game play too, especially where he's shortstop eligible, especially with no Gleyber Torres on the slate either. But Reyes and Renfroe in tournaments, I think, are both really good plays. You also could look to Hedges in tournaments because he does have power and he's a catcher. But obviously, I'd rather get up to Garrett Sanchez if I can. On the other side, less inclined to full stack Washington because I think Lucchese is good for one, but also it's a tougher matchup against the pitchers coming in after him. And I think that's probably a big reason why the Nats only have a 3.7 implied run total here. Lucchese's good, but there's just a better chance of them not tacking on runs later. Rendon would be my favorite hitter here. He's just really, really expensive. When you look at price tags, I think Trey Turner gives you a little bit of upside just because it's not a great running matchup against Lucchese, but he will try and run on pretty much anyone.
I always find it funny when DraftKings pays out like 2 minutes after the slate ends on an early slate when the night slate's coming up.
Yeah.
They already paid everybody out. That's pretty funny.
I couldn't tell because my early slate winnings were so low.
Oh, mine was too, but I noticed it go up a couple dollars. I didn't MME. I was doing the early show, and I don't know how you do it. Well, you don't do it leading up to a show. I don't know how Jake does it leading up to like live before lock. He's doing both. Josh does it too. I bubbled everything by like 1 point, and you know what I went with? I went with a lot of Chicago bats. That worked out well.
Yeah, I had a lot of Braves.
A lot of what? Braves? Do you know Fultonevich has allowed multiple home runs in 7 of 9 starts this year?
Yeah, I saw that stat earlier. That's crazy.
Oh, someone put that out there? Damn. Okay. I mentioned it before him. They must have heard the live before lock show.
Yeah, I mean, ESPN definitely was watching.
Yeah. All right. Top stacks. What do you have? Actually, before we get into that, who are your top pitching options? Just what you think you're going to have in terms of ownership.
What I think I'll have: Corbin, Bauer, Skaggs, and the trash can pitching for the Orioles.
All right. Is your mic working?
It's kind of far away from me because I can't get it any closer.
Yeah, you can't. We'll need to fix that because it's getting real low. But you're fine for now.
Yeah, I mean it'll be fixed as soon as I get a desk.
Yeah, I hear you. I can raise you up on my side if we need to. Top stacks?
The same as everybody else. The Yankees, the Rangers, the Orioles. But I think that, like I said at the beginning, it's a slate where I'm going to look to leverage more because I think it's just really obvious spots, but I don't have a ton of confidence in any of them. So looking to get to more Minnesota than the field, looking to get to more San Diego than the field, I think are 2 spots that I'll probably try and take advantage of.
So if we're talking, leveraging lower owned stacks, those are the 2 teams that make the most sense to you?
Yeah.
Looking at top, we'll go till 540 here. Looking at the top stacks for this late slate, top stack probability is pretty condensed here. You've got the Yankees and the Rangers making up 45%. in terms of top stack probability. And then as far as ownership goes, they make up like 30%. So, but also it's only fair to point out that at top value, the Yankees and Rangers are 1 and 3 respectively. But we talked about which teams did you say you were going to leverage with? Minnesota and who?
Minnesota and San Diego. Looking at the top stack tool, if San Diego ownership is actually as high as it is in there, I would think that I don't do that as much, but Minnesota looks really good according to that.
Yeah. I'm honestly surprised. I know Oakland's almost at 12%, but it almost seems low given how cheap they are and how there aren't many good cheap pitchers on this slate. Anything stand out to you here when we're by the way, you can check out the top stack tool, ownership projections, player projections, and everything else. Just use the promo code Deeper Dive, one word, get 50% off your first month at Awesemo Plus. That's half off your first month. Just use the promo code Deeper Dive to get all of our features. You can get the Fantasy Cruncher add-on as well. But with the package, if you're just getting the all access, you're getting the ownership projections, top stacks, player projections, lineup builder, articles, and more content from every DFS sport out there, and the best content you can find. And you can also hang out in the Slack chat and talk to other people that love DFS as much as you do, including myself and Adam and everyone else on the Awesemo staff. Anybody stand out here, or any teams surprise you?
So I think what's worth pointing out is that, so obviously Texas and New York are going to be popular, but at least right now with our projected ownership, they still are projected to be two of the best value stacks too, as far as difference between the likelihood of them being the top scoring stack and their ownership. So, it's just an example of just because a team is popular doesn't mean that they're as popular as they should be.
Right.
And you shouldn't be shying away from these teams when you could just make a contrarian play within your lineup.
Right. And just explain how you're calculating that value. Like, just, I'm not asking you to go into the weeds, but as far as like if a team is high owned, but also high owned, but also has super high probability of being the top stack, what exactly are you looking at for anyone that might be using the tool and wants to actually use it properly?
Yeah. So, I just look at it, we have the percentage that they're the top scoring stack. We have the aggregate ownership for the team. And so I just kind of look at the difference between those and get an idea of what teams are coming in lower owned than they should be and what teams are coming in higher owned than they should be. And normally, if my process is working correctly, I'll end up on a couple of those teams that are, kind of undervalued by the field. And so it's just more than, it's one thing to look at ownership and say, there's 4 Yankees in the top, 6 hitters or whatever. But it's another thing to actually figure out based on your projections, the likelihood of the Yankees actually being the highest scoring stack on the slate, and then comparing that to where their ownership comes in. Because, hypothetically, if the Yankees had a 100% chance of being the highest scoring team and they're 60% owned, that would still mean they're too low owned, even though they're 60%. Obviously that's an extreme, but that's basically what you're looking at with the stack tool.
Right. And today they have a 24% top stack probability with 16.5% ownership.
Right.
Right. It's not, it's easy to figure out, but some new tools people look at them and it's just a lot of numbers. They don't really know how to dig into them. And I just think this one's so valuable that it's good to point out exactly how we use it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that looking at a spot like that, it's just kind of a reminder that it's a trap that I think a lot of people fall into, is just like their first thought is everyone likes the Yankees, so I can't play them. And when you look at something like that, like if that ownership holds, it's basically saying that everyone likes the Yankees, but a lot of people are saying, oh, I can't play them, and you should just be playing the Yankees.
Quite frankly, 16% ownership on DraftKings, 12% on FanDuel, and 12% on Yahoo is not very high in a matchup with Edwin Jackson.
Yeah, on a 5-game slate.
On a 5-game slate. Exactly. So, yeah, I think it's a good way to really break it down. And you're absolutely right. If they're 30% owned, but their top stack probability is 50%, well, yeah, they're going to be owned, but not where they should be. And that's really all you're looking at. And of course, this is just these are projections. It's not going to be perfectly on the nose, but it gives you exactly what you need to expect. And honestly, you don't need to be crunching 150 lineups to use something like this. Like if you're doing a single entry or a 3 max even, and you don't want to be on the team that everyone else has, it's still valuable.
I utilize it more for those tournaments because a lot of times my ranking system kind of gives me teams that I don't want in those smaller field tournaments because it's a little bit too contrarian. But if I narrow down my focus and I say like, okay, these are the 3 teams that are going most under-owned by the public compared to where we think they should be, then I can, just kind of focus it on those stacks and picking the one, picking 3 of those stacks in like 3 max.
For sure. Anything else? Any other pointer, strategy, whatever, before we head out?
Just tiebreaker stuff on pitching that I noticed. There is an extreme pitchers umpire in the Minnesota-Cleveland game, hitter umpire in the Toronto-New York game, extremely good hitters umpire in the Texas-Baltimore game. In general, that's not something that I put a lot of stock into like some other people do because Vegas knows who the umpires are and it's
right.
It's an efficient market. The one spot where I think it does make a difference is that, if you have an umpire giving you more strikeouts, that is good for DFS, whereas it might not really be reflected in a Vegas total. But more often than not, it's just kind of a tiebreaker for me. So I figured I'd point those out.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, well, that'll do it for us. Remember, check our sponsor, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports out. Use the link. We'll throw it into the YouTube chat. And use the code AWESOMO. Get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points. Take this information and turn it into some green. Adam and I will be back with you tomorrow to close out the week. Before you go, if you enjoy the show, you like the content, you want to see more of it, hit us with a thumbs up, like the video. It's greatly appreciated, and it helps us out a lot. It helps the site out and all of us at AWESOMO out so we can keep on doing this. Subscribe, hit that notification bell as well so you'll always know when new content's dropping next. Till Friday, we'll catch you back here on the Deeper Dive. Good luck tonight, everyone.